best show.
Thank you. I'm going over here. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to sit in front of the microphone because nobody else is here. Taking my iPad out of its case. I'm putting it in our convenient iPad holder. Patent pending. Because it lets us put the iPad on the table. Like that. See that? Okay. Then, I don't know if you can see this. So, we swipe to open. And we make sure we're on the correct wireless. We go to an app called Colloquy. It's a purple icon. Colloquy. Colloquy. It's an IRC chat room for iPad and iOS. And luckily, it saves all of our IRC settings. So right now I've got irc.theonering.net. TheOneRing has our own IRC server. Can you believe that? Not just a channel, a server. But today we're going to chat Ustream, and we'll join the Ustream chat there. All right, let's change this angle just a little bit so I can see what's going on. Perfect. Hello, everybody. I think I see people in the chat room. I see Moyer, Stargate Geek, Pont Mercy. Next, I'm going to take my iPhone. I'm going to turn on the Skype so you can Skype with us. TheOneRing Net, all one word. TheOneRing Net is our Skype. And then our chat. And then you can text me or call me at 530-64-FRODO. 530-64-FRODO. One of these days I'll make a lower third for our video chat screen that has that name, that number on it. But if I go 530-64-FRODO, which means it's 530-643-7636. And then you can change quality, video quality only on the web version. I don't think you can do it on the mobile version. But Ustream has a chat. Ustream has an app for all devices, and we're gonna get started because my name is Justin. This is Torn Tuesday. All the news for Hobbit that's fit to print. Actually, no, not print because we don't print. We stream this live at theonering.net/live via Ustream. We used to be on Stickam, but that went out of business. We used to be on Justin.tv, and then that went out of business. So now we're on Ustream. So the One Ring has lasted longer than the two very well-funded video sites that we used. So say what you want about us Hobbitses. We know how to survive. I found this wonderful red jacket thrift storing in between here and Salt Lake Comic-Con, which we were at this last weekend. And it's Salt Lake City. Weta was there. A bunch of people were there. It's great to see the dragon, the robot dragon. And I found this in a thrift stop in the middle of the Nevada desert. And I thought, wow, this is very Bilbo-y. You can't really tell because the light's very orange. But it's not as red as it shows on the video screen. It's very Bilbo-y. The only thing I'm missing now, I've got of course my Gandalf shirt. The only thing I'm missing now is a green vest, and I haven't been able to find a good green vest that I can wear on the show. You know, that goes with my red Bilbo jacket. So if anybody there watching or listening on our podcast on iTunes or on our YouTube archive or here live on Ustream, if you see any green vests, send them to Meltdown Comics in Hollywood, California, and I will wear it on the show. I'm about a large or an extra large, I think. I think this is a large jacket. I don't know the specific things. It was just a thrift store, you know, small, medium, large. Why don't I get one made for me? I don't know. You know, because, you know, embarrassment of riches. All of my friends that are seamstresses and cosplayers that can make clothes, they're all busy on that sci-fi TV show. So everybody I know is everybody I know that makes costumes is actually professional cosplayer, and they've actually been hired by all these TV shows and YouTube channels to make costumes. So everyone's super busy, and I don't pay as well as a TV network does. We got a text from on the hotline 53064 Frodo. Good evening, Justin. Thank you, Hobbit fan 202. So let's look at the chat. We've got Pomp Mercy saying the video is black and then it's back. Suit shops. You know, as much fun as we have doing this show, I've never made a penny off of our show, our podcast, our live stream. So I'm trying not to spend as much money, any money as possible on this show. It already, you know, it already cost me whatever to travel here every day and to you know, get water and food and everything like that in before the show to stay hydrated. So I'm just trying to be like that. But we've had such an amazing week and amazing fan responses from our questions on Facebook and Twitter. It's been amazing. I thought we'd talk about some of that wonderful stuff. But before that, yesterday was the 8th of September, which means it's Bilbo's birthday. Not Bilbo, but Martin Freeman. Bilbo's birthday is on the 22nd, I believe. 21st or 22nd. I know we're doing something big for Bilbo's birthday in Griffith Park here in Los Angeles. Open to the public, free picnic and games and cake and stuff like that. But yesterday was Martin Freeman's birthday. That guy is only 43 years old. 43 years old. He's in The Hobbit, which is going to be one of the highest grossing movies of the year. He's in Sherlock, and he's now an Emmy award-winning actor on Sherlock, which is going to be an amazing series to complete. And then he's on Fargo, which is just has so much positive vibes and reviews on cable television. So I mean, I feel like the next step is like doing a Broadway show. Oh wait, people in the chat room are saying that he is doing stage. So I guess movies, TV, cable, the stage. When are we going to see an album? I'm waiting. I'm waiting for. I guess that's the only thing that he has left to conquer is music. Sting has a guy tuning his guitars. You should have someone tailoring. That's wonderful. eBay or Amazon? Maybe. That's a good idea.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Cliff's here.
Hello,
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
How are you? Hello.
Quite good. How are you?
It's our little buffer. I think Buffer is going to have what one dwarf is going to have the most emotional ending of Battle of the Five Armies besides Thorin.
Probably Bombur.
Bombur?
I'm making a guess that they're not having any dialogue for the character at all until a major revelation and he has a speaking moment at his death scene. I'm just making a wild guess, but that sounds like something that they would do. Hello, everyone.
What would they say that? What other movie has done that, where the character is mute until something happens?
Well, Andy Serkis as Caesar in Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Well, that's
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
That's different. Like, he was learning to talk.
The character didn't say anything human, and when he finally says that one word, no,
because he couldn't.
It becomes like a crazy, like altering moment, and the audience freaks out. The characters on screen freak out,
yeah, but that's
and it's like such a
Bombur.
pivotal and very impactful moment.
We know Bombur can speak. That's different from an animal learning to speak.
We are Groot.
What is
we are Groot. Guardians of the Galaxy has a character that says nothing but the same four words.
Silent Bob. Boom! Thank you, chat room.
There's a lot of characters who are like impeded by by their speech, and then the filmmakers give them a moment at the end where they finally say something or they change what they say.
Was there anything
and it
in
becomes
a Disney movie?
A revelation.
I'm thinking Little Mermaid.
You guys know there's lots of that. Hello, everybody.
Or what?
You know what I have on this memory stick? Lots and lots of memories from the 1977 Ralph Bakshi animated The Lord of the Rings. I have 4 movie clips, some of which will show you exactly how Peter Jackson created, shot for shot, an homage to the original that Ralph Bakshi had. I've got dozens and dozens of images and some great video clips.
Stargate Geek says if you can find a green
interesting.
waistcoat, you can get a gold one. He wears a gold one at the beginning of the movie. A gold vest?
A gold what?
Mr. Bean. That's right, Mr. Bean. He didn't talk until absolutely necessary. That's so wonderful.
Yes, it is.
You know, we got a lot of comments, up to 3,000 likes right now on this post that Legolas only says one thing to Frodo in all the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yes.
He only says one thing.
Yes.
And what's that thing?
You have my bow.
That's it. That's the only verbal communication Legolas and Frodo have in the entire Lord of the Rings.
It's the only way that he directly addresses Frodo. Yes, that is true.
Do they have any more dialogue?
No.
In the books?
Yeah, sure. Yes, Frodo and Legolas have dialogue in the books, but
what do they talk about?
I'm not exactly sure, but I'm sure that there are some quick little bits that are in there. Some small asides. I don't think that there's a big chunk of conversation that stands out as important. But yeah, in the movie, that's just one line of dialogue.
So does he? His dialogue is so important. Does he keep his promise? I guess he does, right? You have my bow, and he has it till the end.
Well, at the very end of the Fellowship of the Ring, who of all the remaining Fellowship is trying to take a boat out onto the water to go and follow Frodo and Sam? The only person who cares, the only person who's trying to do it, is Legolas. Remember?
Really?
Yes, it's true. At the very end of Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring,
yep.
Peter shows us that Legolas is so concerned. He's
almost
getting ready to go.
side.
He's almost in the boat. He's almost in the water. And he stops and he looks at Aragorn and realizes, oh, sugar, you're not really going to go. You're not going to even go follow Frodo, are you now? And that's when Aragorn gives this explanatory little bit where he says, we are not going to leave Merry and Pippin to death and torment. Let's.
So does this explain why at the end of Return of the King, on the third ending, when Frodo's waking up in the bed, he sees everybody. He sees Sam and Gandalf and Merry and Pip. But then when Legolas walks in, he's like, eh. And you, like, doesn't Frodo call out Gandalf? Doesn't he like?
No, he says Gimli in really slow motion when Gimli shows up, and he's like, ha, 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 ha.
And he doesn't even mention Legolas.
And he just looks at Legolas and goes, "Aww," with that face, that Elijah Wood sad
I was
face.
just thinking about this. Tell me if you have any personal anecdotes or perspective, but wouldn't it be weird to be like, first meet someone's dad and be like, we don't really get along, and then you meet that guy's kid, and then you become best friends with the kid, and that's kind of what Legolas does. He meets Glowing. He's like, we don't really get along, whatever, and then later on he meets the dude's Glowing's kid, and he's like, we'll have some fun adventures together. Wouldn't that be weird, kind of like befriending the spawn of someone that you met before?
Yes, I suppose so.
I don't know. I was just thinking that'd be a little weird. Gimli talks to Frodo a lot more, but
Gimli talks directly to Frodo, even in the Fellowship of the Ring, where he touches the Hobbit on the shoulder and says all these warnings to him about the witch of the evil Lothlorien woods. A dangerous witch. This is one dwarf. She won't snare so easily.
That's right.
So it leads to that dialogue, and then the actor gets poked in the nose by a millisecond by that arrow.
Really?
The arrow that's in John Rhys Davis's face barely scrapes his prosthetic nose. He does get a whiff a micro scrape by that. And then the actor backs off and he's like, ooh, closer than I thought. You know?
So, it makes me want to go back and watch the trilogy again and see how few of lines each character has with each other. Like, how many times does Sam address Merry and Pippin? You know, how many times does
in the films?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that probably our friend at the LOTR project, our friend Emil, might have a pie chart or some kind of amazing infographic.
That'd be interesting.
That shows the minimum dialogue between certain characters. Some of the greatest dialogue between Boromir and Aragorn was all unfortunately cut from Fellowship. Nice to see it restored in the extended version, but anyways, in the books, the Men of Gondor, Aragorn and Boromir, do have some conversations too. It's very interesting to me what these, why people want to keep track of it, but Sam doesn't say much to Frodo and Pippin at all through the movies, except, "You've been into Farmer Maggot's crops," which is the only way we identify who this character is.
Yeah.
And a newbie who's never read Lord of the Rings, never seen it, will watch that scene and completely over their heads. They don't know who Farmer Maggot is. They don't know why Sam is talking about maggots. They don't get that scythe bouncing through the cornfield is actually a farmer.
I got that, and I hadn't read the books. I got that. Farmer Maggot is the guy that's sweeping his porch, that's always looking mean.
That's not Farmer Maggot.
That's who I think he is.
Farmer
Maggot is the guy that's always. He's the first one that they see when they come back.
In the movies,
the last one that they see.
In the movies, the grumpy face hobbit who's sweeping his porch and makes that grumpy face as Gandalf goes by, and then he grins and giggles, and then his wife catches him in the act, and he goes back to grumpy. Well, that's Everard Proudfoot. Everard.
Is that confirmed in the films?
Yeah, he's got a full name credit. He's in the credits.
He's in the credits.
He's in the credits because he has a line of dialogue. Bilbo's birthday speech, and he says, "Baggins, Boffins, Bulgers, and Proudfoots," and he goes, "Proud feet," which is an exact take from the Ralph Bakshi film, where there's a hobbit in the birthday party with his feet up and says, "Proud feet." So that's Everard Proudfoot. So it's definitely not Farmer
I thought that was the same guy that chased them out of his farm. Like, get out of here.
Strangely enough, Farmer Maggot is only visibly seen as a scythe or a sickle bouncing through the cornfield. Otherwise, you don't see him at all. And you hear his voice going, "Rah, rah, 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 rah." And that's it for Farmer Maggot.
Really?
He's got a great full chapter and an amazing presence in the books. Farmer Maggot is a much more interesting character, and so is Barlam and Butterbur, actually. These secondary characters just don't appear in the films at all. In the books, they're quite interesting, to tell you the truth.
Well, really, I'm glad they were cut down.
No, Farmer Maggot
movie.
seems to be the only hobbit in all the Shire who has an idea that Frodo Baggins is really in trouble, that something really secretive and really dangerous is going on. And when we come back at the end of the books to the Scouring of the Shire, and we see that Wormtongue and Saruman have moved into the Shire and taken over things with a bunch of ruffians and thugs who are trying to take over the Shire, Farmer Maggot proves to be instrumental, and he keeps his wits about him. He's a great character, and I miss him not being in the movies more fully. In fact, let's go back a step, and I would say, Return of the King has 6 or 7 endings. False endings where fade to white, fade to black, come up again, another ending of the film. They completely didn't have the Scouring of the Shire, and I personally miss it.
Do you think the original plan was
to have... Would have been great to have that.
Do you think the original plan was to have the Scouring of the Shire? Because they did film it. No, in the movies. Do you think the original plan...
I'm sorry. Yes. No. I don't think they planned on filming the Scouring of the Shire.
Well, they did film it, and they showed it in the Flash Forward in Fellowship. So they had filmed it. It was part of principal photography.
They had filmed it, and they showed it in Galadriel's mirror.
Yeah. So do you think the original... do you have any inclination that it was originally part of Return of the King?
Say that again.
Is there any inclination that the Scouring of the Shire was part of Return of the King?
I don't know. That's one of the very few times you'll ever hear me say that on this show.
And this brings up how many other questions and how many other things don't we know? Because we know Peter Jackson was changing a lot about the movies throughout the making of the movies.
Yes, he
like,
was.
The script was very fluid. Like, let's change that whole scene, and let's remove that whole character. Let's remove that whole character. Let's remove that whole character. Like, he was just like, let's take out. Let's keep changing, keep changing, keep changing. So he was doing that through the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see what the original intent was when they went into production. 1999. What did they shoot? What went into production?
Interesting.
And there's so many people saying in the chat room saying, "I want the Scouring," everything like that. And yeah, but
Fosuina says, I think that they said as far back, you guys have lots of good details from listening to the filmmaker commentaries in the extended editions where they said that it wasn't going to be in the film from way, way, way back. But it would have been an interesting bit of darkness to add to the story.
But they filmed it.
Well, they filmed some bits of it that were, going to be used as a clip in the Mirror of Galadriel. Hello. Lights on, lights off. Well, we're back to mood lighting again. Whoa, goodness gracious. What do you have over here? A bit of light for us?
A little light for you.
A bit of light. Let the light shine. Is it a bit too late for us to share some of these bits and clips?
Yes, well, maybe next week.
Maybe next week?
But
that would be very exciting.
We started talking about on our Facebook that what is one chapter, just one, what is one chapter of Lord of the Rings that made you weep uncontrollably on first reading?
The final chapter at the very end of The Return of the King.
And
it's called The Grey Havens. And I'm sure everyone says that.
No, there were so many.
Grey Havens, I guess. Grey Havens.
Yeah, but there's so many people.
That's the obvious answer.
That's the obvious answer. But there's so many people that actually had so many other comments. One of the most popular was Faramir and Eowyn in the Halls of Healing.
Yeah, the houses of healing. Yeah, it's funny how
is that. What was the name of that chapter?
The Houses of Healing.
The Houses of Healing.
And it's actually the name of the chapter in the video, and on the Blu-ray and on the DVD of the film. The Houses of Healing. That was added in.
So you have the Houses of Healing. You have the last chapter. I am naked and in the dark. What chapter was that? The Choices of Master Samwise.
The Choices of Master Samwise is the part where Sam thinks that Frodo's dead and that Frodo's dead body has been taken to Cirith Ungol. And Sam has to decide what he should do. Take the ring to somewhere else? Should he go somewhere else by himself to Mordor? Should he go back to Minas Tirith? Should he go back to Rivendell? Or should Sam actually go and help and save Frodo? And that's where he makes his ultimate choice, to turn left or right, to go backward or forward. And that choice of Master Samwise to rescue Frodo shows a lot of fans how in touch they are with Sam and how it makes them weep in the fact that kind of loyalty, concern, and unconditional love for your fellow Hobbit or your fellow man, in either case, makes Samwise ring true as a true hero of the story. And we got to say hi to Brian Rice.
And there's another.
It looks like the Happy Hobbits are watching, and the father.
That's great. Hello, Hobbit.
Daddy, Happy Hobbit, Mr. Brian Rice.
No wonder he's so active on Facebook and Twitter today. He's sending more messages than ever. Usually it's the reverse. Usually when it's your birthday, you don't log in, but everybody else posts on your page. Happy Hobbit's dad is the reverse. He messages more people.
Yes.
So, but other people were like, when Sam has to set Bill the Pony free.
Well, that's a moment in a chapter. It's not a whole chapter. People started writing these things on the Facebook timeline to actually say that they're isolated moments that make people cry. But if you want to talk about a whole chapter that really makes you cry uncontrollably, to me, it's not when Sam lets Bill the Pony go back to Rivendell. It's really, really like, you want to read a whole chapter that you can hardly get through because you can't turn the pages because you're crying so much. It's the Grey Havens.
That's what people were saying, though. There's some people that say Grey Havens, without a doubt. Sam said...
look, one fan made a mistake and thought when Haldir gets killed. That doesn't even happen in the books. There's no Haldir in the books. What are you guys doing?
The charge of the Rohirrim at Minas Tirith, it still chokes me up. That's a wonderful moment. Gandalf's fall. Lothlorien chapter. What was the name of the chapter of Lothlorien?
Lothlorien. That's the name of the chapter.
It? Wow.
Yes, that's it.
In Two Towers, in Shelob's lair, I cried. I can't even describe.
Yeah, there's the name of the chapter, Shelob's Lair. See, that freaks people out too. That's really intense chapter. That's a very intense
when
chapter. When
Boromir died, the price. Well, what chapter is the price?
Happy birthday? Are we saying happy birthday also to Brian? We're not just shouting out to Brian Rice. We're actually saying a happy birthday message. Is that correct?
Oh, well, he'll have to watch the whole show to see if we get to that
yes,
point.
It is his birthday. Hi, happy birthday.
So the price. What chapter is the price?
The price?
Yeah. Maybe that was just.
There isn't a chapter
in
any of the Lord of the Rings called The Price.
To be entirely honest, I cried right along with Bilbo. No spoilers! Oh my god! I can't believe I started reading that. The breaking of the Fellowship, though it wasn't at first reading.
Ah, yes.
You know, and a few other people have said that. Like they actually cried more during the second and third readings because they know they become so emotionally involved with the characters.
Yes.
So when the Fellowship breaks,
yes,
it's heavier.
Well, Professor Tolkien believed that this kind of pain and this kind of tragedy had its own beauty. He thought that there was beauty in the sacrifice that the characters made towards the fight for good, towards the role that they played for goodness, winning out against evil, and he thought that there was something called a catastrophe. A moment where the human soul starts to feel particularly touched and moved from the power of the catastrophe. And it was, a philosophical point that Tolkien rendered rather well in The Lord of the Rings. It's in the style of other great, Scandinavian epics and the Icelandic poems, the great epic Eddas, and the Viking poems, and there's a rich tradition in this type of literature, a rich tradition for there to be beauty found within a tragedy itself. The tragedy of the breaking of the Fellowship, the death of the son of Gondor, and the tragedy of the lives lost at Helm's Deep, and the battles and the inhumanity against man shown by Saruman, the scouring the Shire. The scouring of the Shire in the book brings a great deal of pain and painful memories to see.
I don't think anybody mentioned that.
The innocence of the Shire being wounded and hurt by Saruman and evil coming to the, it's the most beautiful place in the world. You think of the Shire as a safe haven, and yet evil comes right to the front door of Bag End. Right to the front doorstep, evil comes to Bag End. And Tolkien was really big on this point, speaking, from a literature point of view, that the cost of how hard it is to fight against the encroachment of evil, that cost and that pain and that tragedy that is always inherent in that fight, held a certain beauty of its own that motivates humans in their hearts. And Tolkien understood this. And I think this is why we are readers of Tolkien, like repeat readers. A lot of fans, I know you guys must admit, you are voracious readers, and you guys like to read things over and over again. And there are parts in Harry Potter that you read, and they make you weep as well, because you realize that, Snape did it all for Lily Potter, because there's a revelation of emotion and humanity, and we start to realize who we are in certain levels of tragedy. And, Shakespeare, of course, all the classics, and the Greek classics, Sophocles, God knows, there's a lot of writers who know that there's beauty to be found in painful situations. Tolkien, he knew better than anyone. And I think that's kind of interesting that you asked this question. It's a very interesting and
it was very specific.
Insightful.
As
question.
me in the chat room says, when Sam sees the star through the dark on the side of Mount Doom. When Sam sees the star through the dark.
When Sam sees that isolated star, the star of Erindil, that the elves held in such high regard, and a little bit of elvishness, an elf quality rubs off on Sam ever so slightly. That's a great part.
Other people said when Faramir says he would not pick it up if he found it laying by the road.
Things that make you cry.
Really?
In The Lord of the Rings. Today's we're going to center and focus on what chapter in The Lord of the Rings and what parts of Tolkien make you weep and make you feel that there are tears that you can't stop. And in The Hobbit, there's definitely a chapter in The Hobbit that...
Not yet for me.
That makes people just feel...
The list of all the ones who died on Pelennor Fields.
Ah, how about that? How about that?
I think it was the Tower of Cirith Ungol. When Sam finds Frodo
Thank you, Hobbit fan. Thank you, Hobbit fan 202.
by
I
singing
appreciate
an
that.
elf song, and hears Frodo's faint answer.
Yes.
Is that what happens in the book?
Say that again.
In the Tower of Cirith Ungol, when Sam finds
It's pronounced
Frodo,
Kirith Ungol. Sorry, you're on the Lord of the Rings show. You got to say it right. It's
whatever.
Kirith Ungol.
That's why you're the expert.
That's why I'm here.
Where Sam finds Frodo by singing an elf song and hears Frodo's faint answer.
When Sam finds Frodo by singing a faint an elf song and hears Frodo's faint answer. Yep, that's really quite amazing. That's really quite amazing.
Really?
Um,
And then
you're welcome, Kelly.
And then this
You're
guy
welcome.
says the second place he always cries in the book was to the Battle of Pelennor Fields. In the first few rows, explaining how Pippin had always cried whenever he heard the horn blow after hearing it at dawn when the Rohirrim arrived.
Yes, yeah, there's a.
Woo!
How about that bit? There's something of the U catastrophe, and it's spelt with an E-U. A U catastrophe that Tolkien is talking about. You find it in the heartstrings and the feelings that you feel in The Return of the King with the lighting of the beacons. And that epic sweep of music that Howard Shore gives us, with the brilliant aerial photography of all the white mountains of Gondor. That is a feeling of beauty being something so beautiful and so big that it makes you cry when you're exposed to it.
Joanna in the chat room
You know what I
says
mean?
the discovery of the state of the Shire when they return. That's the one thing that makes you cry? That I hadn't even thought of that. And you were started talking about that. Many partings. What
Yes.
chapter is many partings?
Many partings?
Yeah.
Many partings is when all the characters say goodbye to each other, and Aragorn stays as the new king, Elisar. He stays in Gondor, and they take their paths back to Rivendell, and then, Elrond, he says goodbye, and everybody branches off and goes on their own way home, as the hobbits are heading back to the Shire. And they steadily lose everyone, and everyone,
Another moment, it didn't. But a window on the west is a great chapter. A window on the west.
Yep, that's when Faramir and the men under Faramir's charge, the Rangers of Ithilien, they're in Ithilien at the secret hidden pool, and
they can't. He says he can't help but be moved by the passage where Faramir describes the decay of Gondor. Yet even so, it was Gondor that brought about its own decay, falling by degrees into dotage, and thinking that the enemy was asleep, who was only banished, not destroyed. They hungered after endless life unchanging. Kings made tombs more splendid than the houses of the living, and counted old names in the rolls of their descent, dearer than the names of their sons. Childless lords sat in aged halls, musing on heraldry. In secret chambers, withered men compounded strong elixirs, or in high cold towers asked questions of the stars. So basically he's describing a Gondor that is disconnected from its own society.
Yes.
Ruled by stewards that were more obsessed with their lineage. More obsessed with their lineage than their heraldry than their actual descendants.
That is correct. That's right. Instead of
that's pretty powerful.
They weren't interested in building a world forward. They were just too busy looking at the standards of the past.
Marie says in the Two Towers, Book 3, first chapter, The Departure of Boromir.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like as soon as you open up that book, she's already crying.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely amazing.
Someone finally said the Scouring of the Shire. Scott says the Scouring of the Shire.
He did say that. I have to admit a correction now, for the record.
Yep.
My incorrect use of the word eucatastrophe, spelt EU, which is a prefix from the Greek added to the beginning of the word. It was a term coined by Professor Tolkien himself. And he's not talking about a moment of dire pain and tragedy that somehow is steeped with its own beauty. Instead, he was talking about a sudden turn of events at the end of a story which guarantees that the protagonist does not meet some terrible, impending, and very plausible doom. And Tolkien formed the word himself from Greek to the beginning of the word catastrophe, usually referred to in literary criticism as a word of unraveling or the conclusion of a drama's plot. For Tolkien, the term appears to have had a thematic meaning that went beyond its basic etymological meaning in terms of form. In his book, in his 1947 essay on fairy stories, Tolkien says that the eucatastrophe is a fundamental part of his whole concept of building, mythopoeia. You're building, a world with mythology and languages all surviving in it. And so it's not exactly the same as a deus ex machina, because it's different. Mm-hmm. It says eucatastrophe has been labeled as a form of deus ex machina due to both of these things in literature sharing an impossible problem suddenly being resolved. However, differences between the two things have been noted, such as its connection with Tolkien's optimistic view on the unfolding events in the narrative of the world. Eucatastrophe can also occur without the use of a deus ex machina, which is what the Eagles are. The Eagles are very often referred to as a deus ex machina, God from the machine, which means a sudden rescue when the character's in a pickle.
Always.
And nothing can happen. You
Times.
bring the Eagles in. We were just talking about that on the other episode, right?
Yeah.
But Tolkien actually felt that. He described Bilbo's eucatastrophic emotion at the eagle's appearance in The Hobbit as one of the key moments in the book. One of the moments that Bilbo has, this emotion and this feeling that the eagles arrive as a eucatastrophe, is a moment that was important to Tolkien, and it's built into The Lord of the Rings as well. So I misused the term, but I can see how it literally applies.
What was also sad, Glynis says this, what was also sad was the footnote about Arwen's fate after the passing of Elisar.
After the passing of Elisar? Oh yeah, that's very sad. That's in the appendices, isn't it?
Yes.
In the appendix, yeah.
Christina says, when Aragorn leaves Caras Galadon to never come back. Where is that?
When Aragorn leaves Caras Galadon to never coming back?
I don't know.
Yes, well...
What is she referring to?
Galadriel says, bye-bye, Elisar, we'll never meet again. She says that in the movie.
Oh, that's in Lothlorien?
Yes, and in the book, there's a mention that, Aragorn leaves the Caras Galadon and knows he will not come back.
Well, I never heard of that
it's mentioned by Tolkien.
In the movie.
Everyone says the song at the end of the third movie, the one performed by Annie Lennox.
The Field of
that makes us all cry. Yes, it does.
The Field of Cormalion?
The Field of Cormallin. The Field of Cormallin is not represented in the movies as a field.
Okay.
It's represented in that fade to white, fade back up again, and Frodo wakes up healed in the bed. And, everyone starts laughing in slow motion. And all the slow motion laughter comes into his room.
Yeah.
That was the entire chapter of The Field of Cormallin.
That's
boiled down into that slow motion scene.
Faramir riding off to Osgiliath.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's called the Sacrifice of Faramir.
That's the first time that one's mentioned. Very good.
The Sacrifice of Faramir is not a chapter in the book. It's a chapter on the Blu-ray. And that is actually the scene in the film where I am a soldier of Gondor and you can visibly see me standing on the wall in that scene. And that's where Pippin is singing his a cappella song to
also
Denethor.
In the trailer.
That's also
the bridge of
used in
Khazad-dûm.
trailer.
Very good.
It's a fascinating conversation.
A lot of people now are talking about Boromir's redemption. Boromir's redemption. Interesting. The departure of Boromir. Sylvia is the first fan to mention Éowyn's climactic slaying of the Ringwraith, and her body found by Éomer on Pelennor Fields. So there, jeez, and another one saying Field of Cormallin.
A lot of people say the Field of Cormallin. Do you know what happens in the book? Since you don't seem to remember it, but you did read it, didn't you?
Yeah, once.
Well, after the Black Gate is destroyed, and Sauron is destroyed, and Ring is destroyed, and Gollum is destroyed, and all the bad guys are gone, Frodo and Sam have been picked up by the Eagles, a eucatastrophe, according to Tolkien, and quite literally, Frodo wakes up in this room where he's been, passed out in a coma for days and days and days and days. And they're out on a nice sunshine field, not far in northern Ithilien, okay? Mm-hmm. And they decide that they're going to set up a little place of honor, and there's men of Rohan, men of Gondor, and the new king, Aragorn, the new king LSR, he is there. And they have this kind of like wonderful hooray moment, like at the very end of the Star Wars film, where they all appear at the end of Star Wars A New Hope, mm-hmm. and there's like a celebration, and everyone's like, yay, confetti, and all the heroes stand on a little platform and wave to the crowd. And that's a little bit of what happens in the field of Cormallen.
So they
feels
combine
like
a little
that last
bit.
shot of Star Wars, yeah.
They combine a little bit of that.
A little bit, yeah.
Rosalie says Lothlorien, all of it. The most beautiful place. I want so much to be there. More people, Casey, when they arrive in Lothlorien. Wow. People are... there's a lot of people saying Boromir, Lothlorien, Boromir, Lothlorien. The end of the siege of Gondor. And in that very moment, away behind, in some courtyard of the city, a cock crowed.
Yes.
Shrill and clear he crowed, wrecking nothing.
Wrecking
nothing.
Meaning reckoning. That was his version of saying the word
wrecking.
reckoning.
Nothing of wizardry or war. Welcoming only the morning.
Yes.
That in the sky far above, the shadows of death was coming with the dawn.
Yes.
And as if in answer, there came from far away another note. Horns. Horns, horns. In dark Mindulloin's sides they dimly echoed. Great horns of the north wildly blowing. Rohan had come at last. God, I love when people leave quotes from the book. Just reading that on Facebook gives me...
It's brilliant. Yeah, we need to... Look how many likes on that. Because somebody quoted a lengthy and beautiful passage from Professor Tolkien.
And that was just yesterday.
Look, how many likes did he get? 72? 23.
23. And that was yesterday. And this is like 4 days after this original post.
Everyone clicks like on that. Sarah said none, but maybe I'm a hard ass. Now, in the movie, it's when everyone kneels for the Hobbits.
Yes.
Now, there's a fan who reads the books and does not cry. She watches the movies, and she cries when Aragorn says, "You bow to no one."
Catherine says...
Now, that's a beautiful moment.
That will make the hardest of hard men cry as well.
Do you think anything in the third Hobbit film can come close to what we see at the end of The Return of the King?
No.
As far as tears factor.
No.
This is what we're talking about, guys. What makes you cry in The Lord of the Rings? Will you cry in The Hobbit?
Not just in Return of the King. There are moments in all three movies that were just like... When Gandalf fell, I probably felt... That was probably the second... Besides My Friends You Bow to No One, which just brought it.
Yeah, it did.
That amazing tune after Gandalf falls in Fellowship. Mm-hmm. I mean, the filmmakers give the audience a respite. They had to. They give you like 45 seconds of just the most beautiful music to say, take a moment to appreciate this wizard's life.
Yes.
Because it was that. I mean, it brought the feels, and we're not emotionally there. And everyone keeps talking about people are gonna start crying in Battle of Five Armies, when Bilbo and Thorin. But I'm not there. I don't think anything in the third Hobbit movie will do that. Catherine says actually the appendices when everybody dies. Merry and Pippin in their old age visit Éomer, who shuffles off this mortal coil. And then they do. Aragorn dies, and Arwen wanders back to Lorien, and there is her green grave. Legolas and Gimli leave, and thus was come to an end of the Fellowship of the Ring.
That's a beautiful moment too. Now our friend Emily is trying to call us on Skype, and
all right,
we'll turn on the Skype
in a few minutes.
In just a minute. But Emily, I love the chat, and I love all the interaction with you guys here in the chat. Thank you for joining TheOneRing.net yet again for our live Torn Tuesday. Let's talk about what makes you cry when you read really good books, and why is it Professor Tolkien seemed to think that it was so important for us to,
June says,
shed a good tear. Now, the woman is asking. This young woman has just asked me a question that I should immediately know. How many times in all the movies, the 3 Lord of the Rings movies, do you have characters crying?
Oh well, we
Quite a bit.
tweeted that. We tweeted that.
Did we tweet that?
During the other weekend.
Emil, we need Emil to give us an infographic for this.
We tweeted during our live tweet of the TNT marathon of the Lord of the Rings trilogy last weekend or the weekend before.
Yeah.
Every time someone cried, we tweeted it out. So first tears courtesy of Arwen. In Two Towers, it was the first tears were from Arwen. Second tears were from Theoden.
Yes.
Over the
death of his son.
The death of his son.
Fantastic.
And then the third tears were from Wormtongue.
Wormtongue cries. Yeah.
Over an army.
You missed Éowyn. Éowyn.
No, she cries fourth.
She cries fourth?
Yes.
Doesn't she cry like at the?
No.
She's visibly crying when Brad Dourif walks into the room to give that impassioned speech. Of
yeah.
Beautiful.
It's Éowyn. It's not Arwen. Arwen is fourth.
Oh, wow, there's a lot of crying. Was this Two Towers? What
that
about
was
Fellowship?
Just Two Towers.
How many people cry in Fellowship?
You have to go back to through our Twitter timeline.
Yeah, Emily, that's a big head count.
Kayla says
all of the characters are all crying, with the exception of Aragorn and Gimli. I think Gimli's not crying, but Aragorn and Gimli are the only two not crying after Gandalf dies in the Mines of Moria. And when they get outside to the Dimrill Dale. And out to the east gate of Moria. It seems very interesting, but
Kayla says that I've cried
is there a
all
tear in
through.
Legolas's eye?
She says I've cried all through Tom Bombadil section forever. Why would that bring the tears?
I don't know. I had never cried at Tom Bombadil's stuff.
Yeah, I thought
never
that
cried
was
at that.
one of the more fun.
Yeah. Hello, Tyndalf, and hello, Mayor, and hello, Griffinclaw 37. Hello, the name is Eonway. She says, I cried reading The Hobbit. I cried at the end of an unexpected journey, actually, when Thorne admits having misjudged Bilbo. Ah, nice moment.
The White Rider. Curtis says he cries at the White Rider. What chapter is that?
The White Rider?
Yeah. Is that a chapter name?
Yes, it is. It is. The White Rider. That's a chapter that refers to Gandalf on Shadowfax, as he is riding across the great landscape. And I'm pretty sure that, Gimli is busy trying to get back in there. That's right. Gimli was... the name is Eonway. Yeah, he's a dude. You're a dude. Got it. Gender check. Thank you. The name is Eonway. Got it. We've got it. There's we didn't know. With certain nicknames online, you never know. But
Deb says when Sam took Frodo for dead after Shelob got to him and his reaction, she says, I wept so hard I could hardly read the pages.
Oh my, yeah, that moves. Oh, what about you, Mr. Justin? Why don't you tell me something that made you weep when you read it?
Nothing in the books. Books don't make me cry. I've only read it once, and I read it after the movie, so I kind of.
And it didn't make you cry?
No, I don't read for books. The act of reading makes me cry. Cindy says I read these books 40 years ago for the first time with no clue about how the story. I cried 50 times or more.
Wow, that's awesome.
Even now, with that many readings later, many chapters still touch my spirit. Thank you.
Isn't that lovely? That's very, very nice.
Let's see, what else? Of course, the breaking of the Fellowship. Also, when King Theoden shouts "Fourth Aeolingus" at the end. Let's see, the Tower of Cirith Ungol when Sam finds Frodo. Gandalf on the bridge of Khazad-dûm. We're getting a lot of people saying, in Fellowship, the breaking of the Fellowship, the Two Towers, nothing made me cry, but Theoden's death and the Grey Havens made me weep, but not half as bad as Beleg's death and the Silmarillion.
Yeah, Beleg's death and the Silmarillion.
Threw the book down on the bed and bawled.
Yep.
Really?
Oh, the Silmarillion is an ass-kicking book. It's very sad.
Well, really?
I gotta be honest. Yeah. Well, hell yeah, yeah. There's passion, a lot of passion in the Silmarillion. Obviously, there's passion in the Lord of the Rings, but the Silmarillion, when you get
It's
past,
all passion.
well, when you get past some of the difficult academic, dusty conversations about
Begat, begat,
This-
begat, begoth, begat.
this, Methuselah begat Brahebe, begat Bahuja, begat Dingaling. After you get past all the generational coding of different lines of brotherhoods of men and elves and dwarves, and you get down to real story about the passionate characters and some of the horrible things they go through, you will be crying. Silmarillion will rip you up. It's a mess.
We have another.
Believe me.
Baiba looks like from I think Brazil or Turkey. I can't tell. The saddest moment for me was the many dead Dunedin.
Dunedin.
The many dead Dunedin at the Battle of Minas Tirith.
Yes.
The tale of Aragorn and Arwen makes Maggie cry. A lot of people agreeing with when Sam thought Frodo was dead.
Esme is asking, what are you reading from, Justin?
We're on TheOneRing.net Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/TheOneRingNet. There's a post from a few days ago saying what one chapter from the Lord of the Rings books made you cry. And a lot of people agreeing with Field of Cormallen. Let's see, what else?
The Field of Cormallen will hit so many people so emotionally when they read it. I have to admit, it's just amazing.
Lament for Boromir. The last part of Turin Turambar.
Yes, Turambar. The White Rider is a chapter in The Two Towers. And it is where the three runners, the three long-legged runners, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, finally catch up to Fangorn Forest, and they think that this strange white wizard they're bumping into in Fangorn is Saruman. It's the first time that any reader of The Lord of the Rings realizes that Gandalf has returned. So that is the chapter in The Two Towers called The White Rider.
Someone says when Frodo hands his book to Sam, it's over. Like when Frodo hands the book to Sam is when they when
Frodo says, "The last pages are for you, Sam." Yeah, lots of weeping. So what is it about? We read other great books we really, really love, but we don't cry. And why is it we keep coming back to this emotional stuff?
We just spent 45 minutes on many different scenes. I mean, there were so many we didn't even mark them down.
It's hard to get a consensus.
That was that many scenes.
Yeah. Do you think there's a general consensus?
No, there wasn't.
Maybe the two highest responses might be rated with the Field of Cormallen and the Grey Havens.
Grey Havens, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Boromir.
And yes.
But
the departure of Boromir.
But there's so many scenes. How many did we list? I mean, at least more than a dozen scenes from the book that made people cry. What is it about Tolkien that, I mean, this guy makes people cry more than Danielle Steele.
Yeah, he sure does.
Right?
Yeah,
and so
sure
what
does.
is it about Tolkien that makes so many people cry with so many scenes, and how did he get away with it? Because anybody else that would make people cry on every reading with that many scenes and that many chapters just seems like would be a turnoff for a lot of audiences. You'd think.
But
did you read Lord of the Rings? Oh my God, it made me cry. Like, is that what people... You did that documentary, Ringers.
Good friend of mine who was a video game designer at Black Label Games, back when Universal Interactive had that division, and they were trying to get me involved to do a voice for the Fellowship of the Ring video game. And I had to get the producers involved in the books, because I'm like, you guys are not going to make a game like this, and I'm not going to be involved with it unless you guys are really, really in touch with the stories. So one of the lead producers, his name was Anson. You might know Anson Sobey. He's a great guy.
Yes.
You've met him at E3,
yes.
I'm sure. Anson Sobey, who's a real rock and roll tough guy, and God bless him, he sends me a text message a couple of weeks later, and he says, I just finished reading the last page of The Return of the King, and he says, I'm crying like a schoolgirl who fell and scraped her knees up. I can't stop crying. He's a grown-ass man who sent me a message and said, I can't stop weeping. The least likely person that you'd think, and I'm sorry to call you out on this, but other producers on the video game came to me and said, oh my God, because this is their first time reading it.
Yeah.
And they wanted to be in touch with it while they were, making the video game. And they could have some idea of what was right or wrong to do for the game.
Yes.
But they read the book, and Professor Tolkien makes grown men cry. Men who do not. People feel this emotion, this depth of feeling, and Tolkien has always been credited as an author at being able to do that better than anyone. Now, C.S. Lewis certainly makes beautiful books, but he never makes people cry that way.
And how
unless you're
why
reading
does he
some
get
of his apologist,
why does he get away with it?
essays. How does Tolkien get away with it?
I mean, most other authors, that make people cry. How does he get? Okay, let's back up a minute. How does he do it? Multiple times. How does Tolkien write a story? Write 3 stories. Write 6 stories. I'm sorry. How does Tolkien write 6 stories over many chapters that make people cry so much?
This is why. Professor Tolkien wrote in his published letters the following. And I've read this before. I've read his letters. The content of The Lord of the Rings, you think it's good versus evil. It's all about sword and sorcery. But you know what Tolkien really wants to write about?
Well, before you start, Moyer says he makes you love the characters. See, I don't think that's it, because there are many, many, many books where I love the characters. Jurassic Park, I love the characters.
Sure.
I didn't cry when any of them got,
because
C.S. Lewis.
Because Jurassic Park doesn't have the thematic reach. It doesn't want to achieve the same goal that Tolkien wanted to reach with The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien is talking about death and immortality in a very specific way. He says...
So was C.S. Lewis.
He says, quote, and this is a direct quote from Professor John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. He says, "But I should say, if asked, this tale is not really about power, capitalized power, or dominion. That only sets the wheels going. This is about death and the desire for deathlessness, as seen through these immortal beings who live for thousands and thousands of years. The Elves. The Elves and their twisted, horrible, tragic history that comes from the Silmarillion, fed into the background of The Lord of the Rings, is thematically a lot of what's going on with Tolkien. Death and deathlessness. And he says, it is about death and the desire for deathlessness, which is hardly more than to say it is a tale written by a man. Because all of mankind is interested in these concepts.
So, okay, so let's take it a step in a weird direction.
Mm-hmm.
If you just remove the elves and everything that they add to the narrative and everything that they add to the other characters, if you just remove the elves, does the Lord of the Rings have the same impact emotionally?
I don't think you can even remove that, because you can't.
There's always a way to write yourself out of things. Like if the elves are instead of immortal.
Throughout the story, death is described as the gift of man, or the doom of man. From an elvish point of view, elves thought that the concept of dying and having your spirit go to some other destiny was very peculiar. They really resented it. They resented human mortal men for having this other mortality, because they knew that they were immortal, and they knew that they would always go to the halls of Mandos, at the far ends of Valinor, at the end of Eman, at the end of time, and there would be another destiny waiting for them that was predicated in their entire deity system. The elves knew this. They complained about it. They were a little bit weirded out by the fact that they had to live forever. And so they were preoccupied throughout all of their lives with hoarding up memory, deathlessness. And using Professor Tolkien's words to describe this, we read these stories and we start to cry and we get emotional because we realize, like Gandalf says in his speech, death is not the end. Death is just only the doorway to other destinies, to a whole new, far green country that is beyond us. And he's like, death is something to look forward to. and every human being lives. Every girl, every boy, every man, every woman, in all of mankind. You know, if you're going to meditate on death, you better meditate and think about the fact that you've got a destiny that you cannot change. So you can't take elves out of this mythology. You wouldn't have the same meaning to it at all, Justin.
Well, no, I was just making a point. Well, Dwina says in the chat room, Tolkien is making a very in-depth connection to the human psyche. He's touching inside the hearts and minds of his readers. But the question is, if everything you just said has to do with elves and deathlessness. In fact, that's Tolkien in his own words. And in an actual Tolkien letter, he says this is actually about the elves dealing with their own immortality, and
yes.
That they're kind of jealous that we have death. So, if that's as important to Tolkien as to put that in a letter, what happens to the emotional core of Lord of the Rings? What happens to the emotional core of Lord of the Rings if the undying elves aren't there? What if it's just like a different race of men, that just happen to be older or something like that? Does it become as emotional? And do you lose? Is there anything that you can take out of Lord of the Rings that lessens the emotional impact? That we can have 20 different chapters that bring tears to adult readers.
Mm-hmm.
Over 20 chapters that bring tears to adult readers. Is there anything that can be singularly removed that just lessens that emotional impact and just turns it into another story?
I understand. I understand what you're saying. Well, it's also safe to say that Tolkien knew exactly what he was doing. Professor Tolkien was a genius, and he knew exactly what he was doing.
And he also took his time.
Well, his depiction of evil is interesting. His depiction of good versus evil comes about because evil is typified as the desire to escape death, like Sauron, wanting to, create these rings of power. The desire to escape death is shown to be,
Wait, I'm not buying
evil.
that because the whole time Arwen is like, I choose a mortal life, and Daddy's like, no, honey, you really don't want that.
No,
that's kind of opposite of what you.
No, not really. No.
Okay.
No. We're talking about what the Númenóreans did.
Okay,
and we're talking about what Sauron did, and as that kind of evil to try and defy death, which the god or the Eru, the Ilúvatar in this mythology, has granted to men as a gift. Human men are given a different metaphysical destiny after they die. And they don't know what it is. It's not given to them to know. The elves, however, are supposed to go to the halls of Mandos, where they may, on the rare occasion, where they may or may not be reincarnated, and their destiny is specific, and they know what it is way ahead of time. And that's why they live and live with thousands and thousands of years on the earth, and they grow weary of it, because it's like our fan, like Griffinclaw just said, the elves knew where they were going in an afterlife. They knew where they would end up. That's kind of tragic, to know that no matter what you do, you're going to end up in this perfect place, but none of your mortal friends will be there, and none of your loves will be there. And, that was the thing that, Arwen was most sad about, was her daddy was trying to convince her to go to Valinor and live in the Undying Lands, and then ultimately, she'd just have to live without the true love of her heart. But, we care about these characters deeply. We, excuse me, we psychologically understand them. We have an imprint of these characters on ourselves a lot of the time, especially with the behaviors of Sam. Especially with Sam. He fits as an everyman, and his psychology fits as an imprint on many of us as we read the story. And you get so attached to characters who are struggling against life and death at every turn, and they all of them pay a cost. Nobody gets a free ride. Everyone pays a very, very serious cost to succeed in the fight against evil. And we're all very involved. And it is interesting. I don't think Tolkien would have had the longevity that he's had for all these generations if he did not succeed in making people touched and that way, emotionally sensing the beauty that is inside natural tragedy, the tragedy of living, of having to be alive, of having to struggle through life. And, our response to the world is something that's really often quite tragic.
So the book, The Lord of the Rings, is not necessarily a story of the redemption of men and the fall of the elves, or the exit of the elves.
Tim Dolph says the Elrond Arwen story is a microcosm of the elf problem.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very good meta
but what makes
conversation of the macro.
What makes us cry at so much at so many points in this book? There's the history of literature, and especially let's just do the history of literature in the 20th century, fantasy literature. There are hundreds of very well done stories and books that have been very well received and won awards and sold a lot, or smaller stories or whatever, but nothing makes you cry as much as Lord of the Rings.
You haven't read the Silmarillion, have you?
Well, okay, let's just Tolkien.
Yeah.
All right. As Middle Earth.
Such tragic. Beren and Luthien. You get really involved in the Arwen Aragorn thing. You should see the original reflection of that, which is the tale of Beren and Luthien.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. What's
sad.
What's Tolkien
so
doing?
Sad and so beautiful, but so sad.
What's Tolkien doing to make us cry this much?
He has a very keen insight into the human heart and what moves us.
Did he experience personal death?
Quite a lot. Yes.
Personal. No, I'm not talking about the war. You have to exclude the war.
Why do you have to exclude it?
Because
you can't exclude it. It informed everything that he is.
War is different than personal.
He was the only survivor of his group of friends. They all died. They all suffered from the most horrible mustard gas and shooting.
Are we talking about guys he met at boot camp?
No, we're talking about his friends from school, his closest friends, who all had to go into the military.
That he grew up as like a primary school.
Well, I'm sure he may have known. Well, he didn't go through consistent schools. He was an orphan at a time when his dad was gone when he was a baby. His mom tried to raise him, and Tolkien was adopted by a Catholic priest. Well, he was kind of like a charge, in charge of watching over poor John and his brother, and it's really fascinating.
The only experience you have the only experience that Tolkien has in death is through the war. So everything, all of the death, it is related to.
We as humans.
His wife didn't die early. His kids didn't die young. The only death he'd experienced
was when he was a very, very young man in his most formative years of his imagination and his intellectual skill and his linguistic skill. Let me say that one more time. That was when he encountered the forces of death in World War I, and when he served in the Battle of the Somme, as a telegraph operator, trying to run lines of copper wire to get telegraphs working in the middle of, trenches and mustard gas and battlefields and bayonets and people shooting and shells, German shells exploding over his head, and he's trying to survive this horror. You've seen it in films. You've seen World War I,
yes,
which was a lot uglier than World War II in certain ways. It was ugliness,
much more personal,
really bad,
much more direct and personal.
All right,
so
only one of Tolkien's friends survived. Only one.
Only one. So that's valid. Okay, that's valid. Like he lost some friends, not just boot camp friends, but true friends from his youth. But that doesn't explain all the death that makes us cry. Like to be able to have an understanding of death at so many levels.
Yes.
Because there are many times that people cry in Lord of the Rings is through death.
Yes.
Or alleged death, and these people die in different circumstances, or do they? Or is it all war? Everything's death and war. Gandalf falls in battle with the great evil Balrog. Theoden dies in battle. Pippin gets crushed, or Merry gets crushed by a horse or an elephant.
In the movie?
No, in the book.
Ha! In the book, yeah, I think Mary gets partially squished by an oliphant.
Yeah,
but not entirely squished.
I remember, like, you know, that's one of the moments. So, is there anything in Lord of the Rings that we've mentioned that has to do that makes you cry that doesn't have to do with war, or is it literally everything's about war?
No, well, someone has suggested post-traumatic stress disorder may have been the most primary factor in motivating the themes that are in Tolkien's books.
That's why it took so long to write those dang books. You know, Tolkien always chided the Chronicles of Narnia, you know, saying that there's no way it could be good. There's no way 7 books of Narnia could be better. It could be good if it took half the time that it took to write Lord of the Rings. He's like, great stories take time.
Yes, they do.
And C.S. Lewis is like, fine, I'm going to go write 7 books and make a ton of money. So, but those books are classics on their own for different reasons. Tolkien was dealing with a lot of issues, I guess. Is that the only way to describe why he's making us cry so much?
I don't know.
And how does he set up characters that are introduced so briefly, but then we're instantly crying for them? We're crying for Faramir. So many people are crying for Faramir. So many people are crying for Boromir. He's only in half a book.
Because Boromir and Faramir are each one side of the same coin. They're very much each two sides of the same coin, to use the phrase correctly. And it's really interesting that the audience wants Boromir to be a Faramir. Faramir doesn't show up until the Two Towers, and when he does show up, his presence is so strong, and what he says is so impactful, we realize, oh, this is Boromir the way we wanted Boromir to be. This guy Faramir, he's got it right. And it's very sad to see Faramir, you know, reflect ruefully on the disintegration of his kingdom, his family, and the death of his brother. He sees his brother's body floating by in the boat, you know? And Faramir has a meditation on the enemy and says one of the most important things, one of the most important lines about what made that enemy become our enemy. Isn't he just a human who would rather have stayed at home with his family in the safety and love and comfort? And what lies and fear were told to him to make him take the long march across all these miles to come and be part of a war that he doesn't want to be part of?
Smaug the Dragon says...
It's fascinating. Faramir makes us cry because of that deeper nobility, and we trust him and we love him immediately. And we realize he is the Boromir we always wanted.
Yeah, Smaug the Dragon says,
really,
because we trust Tolkien, once we read the first few pages of Lord of the Rings, we trust the author. We don't question what he writes. We believe it because we are in a larger world. But it's not just a larger world. You know, why are we crying for so many characters on so many scenes, even if they're only show up for 1 or 2 chapters? Like, what is it about Tolkien's writing that it instantly brings the feels?
He has a great naturalism in his writing. He has a great, very, very easily understood naturalism in his writing. Professor Tolkien introduces characters and situations and places that we find so recognizable and so true to our own home, to our sense of home and safety and self, and our own fears about death and the abuses of power bringing death upon the peace of our lives. It touches every note it needs to touch.
So the question
hits every note he needs to hit. His naturalism and his way of writing is very accessible.
But how is it accessible? Because a lot of authors get you to cry because they put you almost in the first person. You know, you are the character that's experiencing what's going on, and it's a trick of writing. You know, and that's how you get quickly to the emotion. We're never in that position in Tolkien's writing.
Yes.
The closest thing we get to is being Sam, I guess.
Sam, I think...
I don't even know, because Sam isn't on the other 3 journeys. He's not on Merry and Pippin's journey. He's not on the Aragorn's journey.
No.
So how does Tolkien connect with us without us being us? We're not there as a character, as a writing technique. The reader is not a character in the scene. You know what I'm talking about?
I think so.
There's a method of writing. There's a school of writing where to get your reader emotionally connected, you have to bring them into the story.
You do. I mean, you read Kafka. Let's say you read the Metamorphosis, and you do not, or other authors like Moby Dick. Read Herman Melville for once. I had to. And you read certain characters, you don't immediately warm up to them. You don't warm up to any of the characters in Kafka, but you read another author who's also trying to make a strong political statement, like George Orwell. When you read 1984, you feel very, very much for the poor guy who is being watched by every little camera in his room,
and more recently, even Cory Doctorow. Like you feel like you're in that world.
Certain writers are trying to not give you. Really, certain writers are trying to give you a doorway into the world, but empathy isn't the way that they do it. Tolkien automatically puts empathy with characters at the very front door. And yes, thank you, TF Drums, for also saying this in the chat room. But when Winston meets that girl in 1984 and realizes that there's something in his heart that isn't dead yet, we weep. We get to the point in George Orwell where we get to cry, where we feel really emotional because there's the grain of humanity that we've identified in ourselves. We identify it in Winston, especially in his relationship with Julia. We don't know if Julia is a member of the Thought Police. We don't know if it's an elaborate trap or not. But it all ends up with a bullet in the back of his neck at the end of the story. It's absolutely horrific. Everyone cries. And you read certain writers, and I'm an Anglophile. I love my British writers. Professor Tolkien was exquisitely good at making you feel for characters who represented us and our lives and our concerns. And in The Lord of the Rings, it's Sam. Usually, specifically, Sam is the cipher through which we feel and sense the story of The Lord of the Rings. But it doesn't matter if Sam doesn't go on the other branches across Middle-earth and other paths.
It doesn't matter. A full 2/3 of the book is not Sam's story.
Sam's story is stuck with Frodo because when Frodo fails and Frodo's soul is corrupted by the ring, Sam has to be a part of Frodo's soul. By extension, Sam has to be there to be that salvation at that moment when Frodo fails.
Yeah, I get that, but how do we as
an extension of Frodo,
how do we as the reader get so emotionally controlled or so emotionally invested in these other scenes with these other characters if we're not experiencing it along with Sam? Sam is never in Rohan. Sam never meets Theoden.
Yes, Sam never meets. Correct. Sam never meets King Theoden. Never.
But who are we experiencing Rohan and Theoden's
through the
story?
Hobbit's point of view? That's why you have
Hobbit?
You've got a Hobbit in Rohan, Merry. You've got a Hobbit in Minas Tirith, Pippin. You've got Hobbits in Mordor, Frodo and Sam. You have Hobbits at every point of the way.
Are they our entry point?
Yeah, for us to feel and get connected to these places and these. Now, thank you, Tim Dahl.
No, the Hobbits aren't at Helm's Deep.
No, there are no hobbits at Helm's Deep.
So how do we get so... I guess there isn't a lot of tears at Helm's Deep. Good point. If there isn't a hobbit involved, tears are not involved. Wow! This is why we're having this conversation.
Pretty much it. You're getting quite down to the grain, the great grains of truth. Tim Dolph, going back to the Herman Melville conversation, Queequeg is an amazing, amazing character, and he's very evocative. But... it takes a long time for Melville to warm up. You read Moby Dick, and you have to get you really got to get into it, and you have to abuse yourself with the book to get to that point.
It takes a while to get invested into it.
To start feeling the empathy for Ishmael. But Ishmael and Queequeg start off with a funny bit of comedy, like, what the heck? There's somebody in my bed. Who's this sleeping in my bed? Uh-oh. Like, who are you? And they both end up being buddies, and they become good friends and stick together on the ship when Captain Ahab goes nuts. Which doesn't take much. But empathy for characters, I think, happens in Tolkien faster because we have hobbits to connect us to,
There's a text message that
the
says,
world. Yes, what do we have?
It could be because he tells stories, Tolkien tells stories, where there is so much bad happening, yet one small amount of good, then more bad and a little good.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
So basically, Tolkien has a very negative, like everything in Tolkien's world is bad, 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 bad. Here's a sliver of good, bad, 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 good. But going back to our breakthrough in this conversation, are any of the Hobbit characters, all four of the Hobbit characters, they are the reader's entry point into the emotional soul of the stories he's trying to tell.
Particularly Sam. I'll go
particularly
with that.
Sam,
Particularly Sam.
And that's why Sam has to be at Rivendell.
Yep.
That because if Sam and Frodo interact at Rivendell, now we're hooked into the Elvish story.
Well, at the very beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, the book, at the very beginning of the book, Sam is a great entry point character because we're a lot like him. We hear stories of elves, and we want to go into the woods, and we're excited to see them for the first time.
Yes.
Like Sam. And, well, we get to go along on Sam's journey.
That's an Oliphant.
To see Oliphants, and he's like, I'm off to see elves. Oh my gosh, if McGaffrey could see me now. It's like that kind of thing.
That makes sense in the first book. In the first book, but I'm talking the rest of the story. Full 2/3 of the book doesn't include Sam as far as storyline. So, almost all the emotional points that people have described on our Facebook page, saying this chapter made me cry, has to do with there's hobbits there. We're in those scenes as the hobbits. We see Theoden die, and we see Eowyn slay the Witch King through the eyes of the hobbit. The hobbit, by having a hobbit on the battlefield, has put the reader there on the battlefield.
Yes, indeed. Yes, absolutely.
And the fall of Faramir, and all that stuff with his dad and everything like that, we see through Pippin, because Pippin goes up into Gondor.
Yes.
So basically, the Tolkien is using the hobbits as the reader, and he had so much story to tell, and so many facets of it that he realized he couldn't just have one hobbit like he did with the Hobbit.
Yes.
He couldn't just have two hobbits. He needed all four to put us in all the scenes that he needed us to be in as readers.
Yes.
And that is why the Hobbit book and movies are not as emotional. We only have one perspective. We're only in one. We're supposed to be only introduced to the story and to the happenings through Bilbo. We're not supposed to know what's going on in Lake Town, because there's no hobbit there.
Well, maybe so. But
and this is cleverly and carefully. This is why in the book of the Hobbit, he goes unconscious, and then fast forward to the end of the battle.
Yes.
So basically, Tolkien was experimenting with this concept of hobbits are the reader, and with the first Hobbit, and he only had one Hobbit to deal with, and but in Lord of the Rings 4. So that's why we're so emotionally attached.
Interesting concept.
Each of the hobbits represent us, and that's why each of the hobbits are equally well-rounded. Each of them have goals in life. Each of them have humor. Each of them have a job.
Yes.
Each of them have a full identity.
You are very much onto something, Mr. Justin, and I think you might get a benefit out of reading the entire book, The Hobbit. Of many benefits that you may receive, I think that you might get something out of it on the level of understanding Tolkien's love of what you call high romantic or high romance type of storytelling, where things, get bigger and bigger and become more epic and more epic, and you have small individuals who are caught up in events that are much, much bigger than them. And then by the end of it, the story comes back to being very small and very humane again. That happens in The Hobbit on a smaller scale.
Mm-hmm.
It happens in The Lord of the Rings on a bigger scale.
Mm-hmm.
But they reflect one another in that approach, in that way. And I think that you...
See, the whole point of this conversation
pick
was...
up the book and just finish reading it.
Well, the whole point of this conversation was to try to figure out why,
And read-
how and why Tolkien makes us cry so much, and how does he get away with it? How does he do it, and how does he get away with it?
How does Tolkien do it?
And the answer is he does it through the Hobbits. Each of the Hobbit characters are us.
He does it through the naturalism, which is in his writing style.
Yes.
He does it through creating...
That's an abstract, though.
No,
I'm talking
it's a specific literary device. If Professor Tolkien thought that a different type of language...
Naturalism is not a device.
No, it's a school of
Yes.
literature. It's
So the device...
It's a literature movement.
Kelly, where are you at?
It's a literary movement.
What is the device?
What device?
What's the device that he's using to make us cry so much?
Hobbits. More hobbits.
And all four of them live.
More hobbits.
All four of them are alive at the end.
Yep.
And Frodo leaving is basically him dying.
I think,
And that's why we cry so much. Because he finally kills a hobbit. And we're just like, oh.
well, he finally
That's
kills...
when it just comes out.
Several hobbits die in the Scouring of the Shire, and it upsets a lot of readers. That's why they started saying that in our Facebook timeline, because really hobbits actually do die at the hands of evil men at the orders of Saruman in the Scouring of the Shire. And again, it's pretty thematically pure with Tolkien to, remind us of how you think you've got it good, you think that you've got it good where you're sitting, but you don't even know how bad it's going to get. And that reminder of how things get bad, things get difficult, and the price that we pay to defend ourselves and to defend what's good in the world, and that speech that Samwise has at the end of the Two Towers, that there's some good in the world and it's worth fighting for. That is a crystallized essence of Tolkien that makes us cry, and that's why he keeps getting away with it, because it's always true. No matter what generation of people, no matter what political environment or cultural environment you're in, it's always true. People are, like when Miyazaki has a character say...
Oh, no.
Listen,
Don't do it.
No, listen to me.
Okay, go ahead.
He says, in the movie Princess Mononoke, there's a character who suffers from leprosy, and he's completely bandaged up as a leper, and he says the following line. You need to be serious now, Justin. Come on. The world is cursed, and yet you still find reasons to go on living. The same thing that Tolkien is saying. Tolkien, now that Justin here has deteriorated into romper room, I'll continue this literary discussion on my own. Tolkien also gets right to the heart of it, that there is some good in the world worth fighting for, even though it seems to be, plagued by poison and grief and warfare and troubles of the world, but we still find things to go on living for. Don't you think, boys and girls?
Isn't that worth dying for?
Yeah, worth living for. You find a lot of that thematically in J.K. Rowling's work in the Harry Potter universe as well. Yeah. Because she's also
and
having the story of Harry Potter be about a similar theme, death and the pursuit of deathlessness, just like Voldemort.
right.
Voldemort's pursuit of those Horcruxes. Very, very strong thematic influence of Tolkien all over Joanne Rowling, and I think it's evident in her work.
And one of the reasons I want to talk about this today and why I'm there is because I just rewatched and reread all about the Matrix trilogy, and the Matrix trilogy is operating on equal level as far as filmmaking and storytelling. I mean, nothing compares to Tolkien. I'm not comparing them to Tolkien.
No, but you can compare Keanu Reeves' character to a Hobbit. He's an everyman, and all of a sudden he becomes our entry point into the Matrix.
And then he becomes a different character
by the time he's over. Yeah.
By the end of the first film, he's no longer our innocence.
Yeah,
and that
he's no longer Neo.
And that becomes Morpheus.
Yes.
There's a lot I can talk about The Matrix because even the sequels are just as good as the first movie, but it takes a lot of talking through to understand, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So this has been a great conversation. I feel like we accomplished. I feel like we accomplished something. I feel like through the chat room and the text messages and everything, we were able to discover a new value to Tolkien and how he does what he does and why we love it so much.
And why we are attached. And we always have to ask this question, like in Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics.
Yes.
He asks the same question: why are we so involved in these stories, these comic books, the art between the panels? And this is a fascinating question to Tolkien readers, to readers of other great literature. Why are we so involved in these stories? And I think we have covered quite a lot of that today. It's been a fascinating conversation. I want to say thank you to Tim Dolph for saying this is one of the best Torn Tuesdays ever. A very, very healthy intellectual and literary discussion today. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you starting the show on time, Justin. Thank you. It's
I always start the show on time.
That's
and
lovely.
Because
a wizard is never late.
And we can't do this show show isn't as fun and entertaining without everybody in the chat room. It's great to have.
It's Pete Northrunner is here.
Everybody there, Stargate Geek.
Dwina, our dear friend Dwina from Nevada.
It's great to.
And Emily is there. Hello
we got
there.
A text message from Kelly saying my dad
and Jeffrey Lindsay.
My dad Brian
hello, buddy.
Is watching.
Good to see you.
And it's his birthday. Brian, happy Hobbit dad. Brian
once again
is a loyal viewer. He watches the show more than the Happy Hobbits do.
Daddy Happy Hobbit has a wonderful
Brian Rice
birthday happening.
Thank you for staying with us. And I know you watch our show more than the girls do. And I don't know how to feel about that anymore.
Yeah.
But, I guess that it is what it is. And
thank you, Moyor.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Thank you, love LOTR. Thank you, Emily.
You know what?
Happy birthday, Brian.
I'm gonna send you a birthday present from our friends at Spider-Man. A phone swimsuit. It's literally called the phone swimsuit.
A backstrap
from our friends at so that's it. Birthday gift going to Brian Rice, courtesy of our friends at Spider-Man.
Who needs it? Lovely.
Okay.
Lovely.
And TheOneRing. And thank you. Thank you so much for this. I feel accomplished today. I feel like we broke new ground in the show, and I feel like we got somewhere about the books. It wasn't just about the movies or anything and just slamming this and that and whatever. I feel like we accomplished something.
It's always about the books. It's always for many conversations we have, it's about pop culture, and it's about movie making, and it's about the world we live in with our energetic approach to fandom. But today, it's really about Professor Tolkien and his brilliance, the brilliance within. Is this where we sign off?
This is where we sign off.
Is this where we sign off? So, thanks, guys, for being Tolkien fans. Follow me on Twitter at QuickBeam2000. Follow us, TheOneRing Net, on Twitter and Instagram. We got an Instagram, don't we?
Sure.
And follow us on our timeline, on Facebook timeline. I just posted a funny picture today with the entire animated cast of characters from Ralph Bakshi's The Lord of the Rings back in '77. But it's just a number guessing game. You guys go online and see if you can accurately name each character without otherwise looking them up. There's a numbered grid. See if you know who's who in that version of Middle-earth. And we'll do an in-depth conversation about that movie next week on Torn Tuesday. Love to you all. Thanks for joining the show, and good night. Bye.